Love, exciting and new.
Hello, Hannah Waddingham here. Have you seen the fabulous new Sun Princess? World-class entertainment, exceptional dining, and the greatest pizza ever.
It's a love.
Don't miss our Come Aboard sale with up to 40% off and free room upgrades. Visit princess.com or call your travel advisor to book. Princess Cruises. Terms and restrictions apply. Offer ends 2/28/25. Ships of Bermudan and British Registry.
You're listening to What She Said with me, Candace Sampson, and this is your weekly reminder to take up big space in life, laugh loudly, absorb new knowledge, and continue to grow and expand. What She Said is your space for the big conversations that matter and the little joys that make life sweeter. This is where empowerment meets self-care and mansplaining has no seat at the table. So grab a coffee, get comfy, and let's jump into it because life's too short not to embrace the good stuff while we tackle the tough stuff.
The difference between disinformation for your listeners and misinformation, disinformation is, targeted, intended to harm. A lot of political actors will use it, right, to, smear campaign against one of their opponents or, take someone down with lies. But misinformation is just me and you going on Twitter being like, oh, that's crazy, share. And that share is actually maybe the more dangerous part because that's where the networks start working. And it's like, oh man, did you see this? But it might be completely untrue. You had no harm intended behind it, but it's gone. It's out there.
That's Molly Thomas, and in today's podcast, I'm diving into a conversation with her about Big If True, a new show on TVO tackling some of the biggest news stories of our time, where news is often questionable at best. We love to point fingers at the spread of misinformation and disinformation, but the truth is we're part of the problem. Every time we hit share without thinking, we're feeding the machine. And as they say, the first step is admitting we have a problem. And maybe, just maybe, once we do that, we can start fighting back. Molly Thomas is the perfect person to guide us through this moment. An award-winning journalist with experience at CTV, CBC, and Global, she's traveled the world uncovering stories that matter. Now, as the host of Big If True, she's helping us cut through the noise, unpack the tactics behind misinformation, and challenge our own biases. So let's get into it. Let's hear what she said. Molly, thank you so much for joining me today. I want to just jump in with the basics. What is Big If True, and what inspired the creation of this show?
Candace, listen, this show is really just addressing what's going on in our world. I started journalism 15 years ago. I never thought I'd be doing a show on misinformation and disinformation. I mean, those words weren't even in the vocabulary. And today, you think about what's coming at us on social media. You think of the information that you're constantly questioning, the deep fake videos that are out there, the manipulated AI images that we can't really figure out, like, is that real? Is that not? And so Big If True kind of steps in the midst of that and says, okay, let's help people try to cut through some of that noise. We can't do it all. We're going to try one story at a time to try to tackle some of the misinformation out there and hopefully help people just clear their minds a little bit, get a little bit clearer perspective, and also sometimes just sit in the nuance because some things aren't just like true or false. There's a lot of context and nuance that we need to discover around that. So that's what our show hopes to bring up.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most frustrating things for me is that people seem to be incapable right now of holding sort of two thoughts in their head at the same time. They're either very firmly on one side or the other, and we can never seem to meet in the middle to have these conversations about how we move forward. And you mentioned about, how much information is flooded at us. And I watched one of the videos last night, and it was something like 625 million TikToks a minute.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And if you think about the different generations and how we interact with media, and a lot of this show is really trying to talk to the next generation, even younger than me, who are constantly connected, who are not used to, mainstream news sites. I remember chatting with like a 20-year-old that was telling me, I said, well, have you heard of the New York Times? Never heard of it.
Right.
So, right. And
right.
And so she's like, I get everything on TikTok. I get everything on social media. And so our hope is, yes, we're a TV show. Absolutely. We put together a TV show every week, but really it's the segments that go on YouTube. It's the segments that go on TikTok, on our Instagram, places that we can put them out there and speak to the next generation, because that's all they're getting. That's the noise they're getting. And so we have to be in the midst of that, trying to help them maneuver it.
And so you mentioned your target audience. Are you trying to educate skeptics or reinforce media literacy for those who are already engaged critically with information?
Everything in between, to be honest, because, it's all of us. Like, all of us need a re-education. I, as a journalist, need a re-education on these things. And, even if we think about open source journalism, investigations where we're like, doing reverse searches, where we're using the tools at our disposal, AI tools, for us to figure out what to do. The game has changed. We're in a different playing field.
Yeah. It's such a good point, because I like to think I'm fairly media literate. I've lived in this space for a long time. I like to think I'm keeping up with things. And the other day I caught myself falling for something that was AI.
Right. Totally.
And I was so annoyed and irritated that I fell for it.
But I think that's the reality. And we have to be comfortable with the fact that there's so much coming at us that sometimes we will be duped. And that's okay. We just have to start to look for ways to identify what might be messing with our minds, and be able to take 2 steps back and say, okay, where can I check for this? What else can I look at? What other sources can I bring up? We all have to do that, because, if you talk about the AI images, Candace, I saw a stat that, like, in the next few years, we're going to see online, I believe it's upwards definitely of 50% of AI manipulated media. So, like, we have to be ready for this onslaught that is going to be coming at us, whether we're ready or not.
And it's so wildly believable right now as well. That's the crazy part.
For sure.
How do you decide which topics to cover? Is there a particular set of criteria you use when choosing the subject matter?
We're always thinking about, what is the misinformation out there that's flowing that people are getting tripped up on? And that is a wide range, because misinformation, the difference between disinformation for your listeners and misinformation is, targeted, intended to harm. A lot of political actors will use it, right, to, smear campaign against one of their opponents, or, take someone down with lies. But misinformation is just me and you going on Twitter being like, oh, that's crazy, share.
Exactly.
And that share is actually maybe the more dangerous part, because that's where the networks start working. And it's like, oh man, did you see this? But it can be completely untrue. You had no harm intended behind it, but it's gone. It's out there. Right. So I think we have to really think about the misinformation piece of it in every subject. And our subjects range super wide. Like, we've done wellness, all the products that are being pushed to you on Instagram. I found that super enlightening for me. We've done UFOs. Like, okay, people believe in UFOs. Who really cares? Well, there's actual, people trying to grift people off of their belief in UFOs, off of real scams that are happening online. We've done politics, of course. You can't miss that. And so we can go anywhere with this show. Our team is constantly pitching, which also makes it exciting, because we're learning in real time. We're doing romance scams right around the corner. What's the latest there? What's the most popular thing? And how can we try to protect people in this frenzied environment?
You mentioned that you've been surprised by a couple of things. What has been the most surprising or eye-opening thing you've learned while hosting the show?
The UFOs episode was really fascinating to me personally, because I don't follow all things alien. It's not my necessarily target subject. But what I found interesting about it was okay, so, over the last century, we have people in North America that have been completely, just taken over by the UFO theories, whether aliens exist. It's so fascinating. So we, got to go back on the history piece of that. But then it's no matter what you believe, what are the scams that are taking place today? So one of them is about med beds, Candace. And med beds are essentially this fake bed that doesn't exist, but is sold to people as, if you give us money for this alien technology, in the future when the technology is ready, you will get this bed that will, cure cancer, leukemia, you can, right? And people are putting their hard-earned money, because they believe in aliens, which that's fine. You want to believe in aliens? Cool. but they're putting their hard-earned money towards these scammers that are taking advantage of that belief.
And
people,
also their fears. They might have cancer or leukemia and are just,
for
looking
sure,
for anything, any hope to grab onto.
100%. And if you think of, how many Canadians are struggling today in the healthcare system here, right? It has not adapted to all of the needs that we have. We have a wonderful universal healthcare system, but it is failing a lot of Canadians, and a lot of Canadians don't even have a doctor, a personal doctor. So yes, when people are in desperate situations, they will turn to anything for hope, and scammers take advantage of things like that. So, just understanding some of these belief systems, conspiracy theories, alone they might be okay, but when these scammers jump into it, with the online ability to connect with people, we are now in very dangerous territory.
It's interesting about the UFOs recently, with all the drones that were over the U.S. and they were all over social media. Everybody was talking about them. And I don't know if you're on TikTok, but they started to talk about these code words, Dior bags. And I, of course, was like, why are they talking about Dior bags? Like, what is this? And so I jump in to look and see, and then find out that Dior bags is code for UFOs. And then suddenly, for the next 3 or 4 days, everything in my feed is about Dior bags. I'm putting this in quotes, about these UFOs. And I think that's how people get sucked into these conspiracies, is that they sort of unwittingly go searching for what's the meaning behind this word. And then all of a sudden, that's all they're being fed in their algorithm.
Right. The algorithm knows, and it's going to, feed you extreme content, and you're just going to keep going down that rabbit hole. So that's normal. I mean, we're all going to face that, and we all have curious questions, and I think that's important. It's just that where else can we measure that information with? Where else can we look to understand that more fully, and not just jump off of, oh my gosh, that emotionally affected me. I'm so mad about this, or this, I have to do something, and just share it. Let's take a step back. Anything that emotionally triggers you should be like, hold on. Let me just look at a few more sources. Like, literally, that's how we're thinking about on our team. What's triggering us? Let's take a step back. Let's look at it again.
And, with UFOs too, part of what's coming out is it's fueled by sort of the government disclosures that have come out of late, where they've said, yes, there are UFOs and alien technology and things like this. Do you think the media hype around these topics is driving belief, or is it a deeper distrust in government narratives?
It's both. It's both. I mean, I think if you look back at the history of people having questions around UFOs, there's a lot of secrecy that comes from especially the U.S. government around this. And our experts on our show really detail that. So yes, people are like, I saw this happened. And then there's no response, or all of a sudden those people, are told to be quiet. So there is definitely a lack of transparency there, which often, when we don't have transparency, we're all wondering, and it's easy to make up stories and let them flow. But I think it's for us, for our show, it's okay, so those ideas are out there, but who's taking advantage of everyday people with those ideas? And so, yeah, for me, the med beds was super interesting. I mean, another topic, Candace, is tariffs, right? Our country is in the midst of a looming trade war. And our whole show this week is based on, is misinformation fueling this, right? We're talking about fentanyl. We're talking about migrants. It's big, Canada's border is unsafe. It's, causing problems for the U.S. Well, let's look at the facts,
right?
We know that we contribute such a minute number of people being caught at the border. I think it's around 1% for fentanyl and migrants, right? Each. What are we really talking about here? So if there's a big trade war on Canada and we want tariffs for this specific reason, we have to be able to come back and think, what's the context? What's the nuance? What do Canadians need to know in the midst of all this misinformation that's being spread? Otherwise, we're all just left confused.
And who benefits from spreading the initial disinformation, I think, is a good question as well, is who's going to benefit from that. Let's talk about elections, because obviously in Ontario, we're heading into one in weeks, and we'll likely see a federal one. Well, for sure we will by October. So election misinformation is a really big concern. What trends did you see in 2024 that in the U.S. election that are different from past years?
Well, I just think the speed at which information is moving. So even if you look back, we did a show on elections around the world actually last year, because last year was the most elections in history.
Wow.
All around the globe. So our first episode out the gate was about elections around the world. Of course, we have to focus on US, which is our neighbor to the south. But our experts on the program were just talking about, one, like how quickly information is moving, but also like the fact that disinformation campaigns around the world, like they have similar tactics, right? It's like reframing. For example, there was a leader in Indonesia that got elected. He was a leader that had a terrible human rights abuse record. And yet they reframed him in that election with all these cute, cuddly AI images of him.
Yeah.
Did you see this?
Yes. I watched the show last night, and yeah, fascinating.
It's crazy. And so all of a sudden, this person who's done these horrific things is totally a new image to a new generation. And he won over that generation. So you can think about how those tactics can be used around the world to own a narrative. And I think in the US specifically, you have to think about, Trump owns Truth Social. Elon Musk, who's in his government, owns X. And so they, have pushed back against mainstream media, kind of framed them as the enemy to a certain extent, certain networks, and then created their own platforms to push whatever narratives they want with no accountability. And all of that happening at the same time can create whatever image you want to put out there. And so people were confused. Like I saw Ipsos read polling data that Americans were confused about inflation and crime. Those are two of the biggest issues when you're dealing with who to vote for. So if people don't know the numbers, what are they voting for? So it's like two different realities are happening in the US, and it's serious, and it will always impact us here because we are always connected.
Absolutely. One of the things, of course, the saying, a lie will travel around the world before the truth has its shoes tied up. How effective are fact-checking and debunking efforts when misinformation spreads faster than truth?
Oh, it's difficult. To be honest, it's really difficult because fact-checking takes time, especially for complex issues. We did a show on something called the liar's dividend. Essentially, that it's working for people some politicians can lie, and lying is better than if they asked for forgiveness or if they apologized or if they just kept silent on a scandal. Lying actually works to their advantage. So, I would argue when we look at that kind of data, like it looks like, Trump is someone that benefits from something like that. He has made that work. So fact checkers are trying to keep up, but Candace, like Canadian newsrooms, American newsrooms, I just saw cuts today. There are cuts in so many places, and so newsrooms are much smaller. How much time do you dedicate to fully fact checking, which takes time? Fact checkers, might take 2 days, and by 2 days later, there's already doubt in people's mind. And why the liar's dividend works so well is because that doubt, the ability for that doubt to just sit and permeate is enough for people to sit back and be like, I don't know, but they may not actually see the fact check 2 days later. They may not actually follow up. So then it's just the doubt, and the doubt is enough to influence how they behave, how they vote, how they, feel, what they fear. And so that is all playing while we are like passing around a lot of false narratives out there, and it is creating a perfect storm.
Hey, it's Bill Simmons from the Bill Simmons Podcast here to tell you about Michelob Ultra Courtside. It's getting fans closer to the NBA with a chance to win prizes like courtside seats, a trip to All-Star Weekend, and much more. Check it out at MichelobUltra.com/courtside. Michelob Ultra Superior Access, Courtside 24-25 sweepstakes, no purchase necessary. Open to U.S. residents 21 and up. Begins on October 1st, 2024, ends July 1st, 2025. Multiple entry periods. Visit MichelobUltra.com/courtside for free entry deadlines, and official rules. Message and data rates may apply. Void where prohibited.
Hey there, this is Todd Arkell, host of The Mental Approach. Thank you for taking the time to listen to The Mental Approach. I created this series for parents and their athletes because everyone is training their physical skills, but so few of you are training your mind. And I've assembled a cross-section of athletes and coaches as guests to provide you with inspirational stories, practical advice, and some encouragement to gain the edge you need both on and off the field of play. This show is available on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Amazon Music, and of course at thementalapproach.com.
Deepfakes, as we were mentioning, are really scarily realistic. Are we at a point where we can no longer trust video evidence?
Oh, I'm a TV journalist, so that's really hard for me to answer. But I think we're moving towards that place. I mean, there are technologies that are being formed, with AI to work the opposite way, to try to detect the opposite AI and be able to source it out. So yes, things are happening at the same time. It's just which one's going to move quicker. That's really the question. But we need that type of technology to be able to suss it out for us, because yes, when we get to a point where AI takes over most of our feeds, we're going to need more help than just a human eye, for sure. Because the videos are incredible. The videos are incredible right now. Think about what they're going to be like in a few years.
Oh, it's horrifying. I mean, I remember one a few years ago where this comedian who could pretended he was somebody else's voice. They were able to morph his face, at about 100 times through one video, and it was spooky. And that was a few years ago.
Right.
I mean,
right.
It's mind-boggling what's out there. We're not prepared. So how do we prepare or fight back? Does it begin at what level of education are we pulling kids in to teach them these skills? Where do we fight back and how?
Yeah. I mean, TVO, our whole mandate is education. And so we have teams, working with curriculum experts. We as a show are trying to put out content that hopefully can help the next generation as well. It is just a lot more conversations about the environment that we're in. It's a lot more conversations with experts that can point out and say, this is what you look for. I mean, in our deepfake episode, we had Patrick from the Globe and Mail, being like, this is what you need to watch for, people. We have to be comfortable with those conversations. We also have to be comfortable with getting duped and being okay to talk about that and being like, this is what happened. This is what other people should watch out for, so that our communities can get in that mode. And then we have to get really comfortable with nuance and learning how to change our minds. All of us, none of us are, vacuums of information that we know everything. We can always learn new things. We can always, be in a position where we change our minds. And so we have to be open to that. And that's very difficult to do. I think that's actually the bigger challenge for all of us, is to sit back and think, okay, that looks odd to me, but I want to look at this further. Our show hopefully will help people a little bit, because not everyone has the time. It takes a lot of time to dig into some of these things. And my hope is that some of these topics will answer some of those questions for them. At the same time, just help them with some tools to how they evaluate media, how they feel their own emotions when they're looking at something, the kinds of sources they can go to get a second, third, fourth check, and just to start talking with people around them, because we're all in this together. Whether we like it or not, this is our world.
I really like that you said, sharing our experiences, admitting when we've been duped. It is often easier to be fooled than to admit we've been fooled. People don't like saying they were wrong, but I think it is really important. Like I said, I was duped by AI the other day. So to openly say that I hope would encourage other people to say, oh, maybe I should be more questioning or leery of what I'm seeing and what I'm sharing. And certainly when we, unwittingly share misinformation, I think we should also be able to go back and say that was wrong. Take it off, say that was wrong. At least at the minimum, you might grab a few people and pull them back to reality when you do that.
Yeah. And we're all just a little bit more humble in this environment where it is moving faster than we can all keep up. Our show is a drop in the bucket, and we're trying our best to get information out there and tools out there for people. But this is a crazy environment. Let's be honest. And any of us could be in that situation. And yeah, so if I'm in that situation, I hope I can be honest enough on the show so that people can feel that comfort in being able to talk about these things. On the wellness episode, I've bought products, Candace. I've bought stuff on
well, I
Instagram.
think most women would tell you we have bought all the products.
All of them, right? And so I'm sitting there with like an expert that's like, there's no scientific basis to these things. And it's like, I need to be told that, with all of the, the information I'm consuming and the, the things that I should be looking at, I am still confused and I still buy into it. So we all need to be reminded.
Yeah, because we want to believe it so badly that there is actually a fountain of youth in a bottle somewhere.
We want to look good forever. I get it. But yeah, it's tricky, and we need to just at least be aware that if we're doing it, there may not be scientific backing for it. That's all. Like it's freedom of choice. You can do what you want, but the more you know. I mean, like I don't smoke because I know things about smoking. If I didn't know things about smoking, would I smoke? Maybe,
Yeah. You dedicated an episode to some of the biggest mistakes of misinformation in 2024. What were one or two of the most shocking or ridiculous ones to you?
Oh man. I mean, the most crazy one, when I was watching the debate, the eating the cats and dogs.
Oh.
What? Everyone in my house that was watching was like, what is happening right now? Oh man. But I mean, the hilarious part about social media, as we showed in our show, is just like, people make so much fun of these things, and the next generation is so good at doing this. And some of it, forever will be like a big joke and we'll laugh about it. But we have to remember there are communities behind these comments and they are affected.
Genuinely got hurt in
For sure. And people that, would be proudly Haitian American, contributing to America, proud of who they are, proud of their community, all of a sudden being looked at like they are, treated like savages, And so it's wrong. And it does have implications long term. It's just, we're not used to seeing, the leader of the free world generally speak like that. But here we are. So yeah, we need to double check.
Do you see patterns in how misinformation spreads, or is every case different?
I mean, I think that all of us, come with a certain bias. We come with our experience. We come with our exposure. We come with maybe a political lens that, we were raised in, or some, those types of things. And those influence often who we follow and who we get information, and we feel better about ourselves if it reinforces what we already think. And so I actually really encourage people, do you have people on your feed that you completely disagree with? Do you have people that are vastly different, even if they're sharing misinformation? Because you have to know, like, these are your neighbors. These are fellow Canadians. These are fellow Americans. These are people around the world. And we have to learn how to have better conversations with each other. And right now, we're both like this. We're on two ends of the table, and both of us think the other person is evil. And that just doesn't work. That doesn't work in terms of like an educated society, a society that talks through what the issues are. And so I think with misinformation, I do think that we should think about diversifying our feeds. And then that's why we need the tools so that we can be comfortable with the uncomfortable, the things that make us uncomfortable. And we can still go beyond that and say, okay, let me check that out. Let me look into that. Or ask someone, like, where is that coming from? Because sometimes the misinformation is just, the fact that we might disagree on. But what's behind that? And if we're not willing to go into what's behind that, what's the fear, what's the worry, like, where is this actually coming from? Then we're not really willing to engage with people around us. And that just pits us further apart. So my hope too with this show, we're new, so we're just getting out there, but is to create some of these bridges where we can talk. Like, we can talk to each other, even if we come from completely different points of views. It's difficult when the facts are conflicting, but we are still neighbors. And there's a responsibility in that I don't want us to miss, regardless of if you agree on the same thing or not.
Yeah, I agree with you in theory on most of these points, but I got to tell you, like, I am often enraged because I get baited. I don't respond. I'm learning to not respond and to be able to suss out what is a rage baiting account deliberately there to get you upset, and what is just somebody who is, maybe sharing something that they believe, but it's, it's not based in fact or reality. So it is learning those things. And I think we're all responsible for how we react online. And right now, for me, it's about protecting I think my mental
For
health
sure.
as much as anything, because I see a lot there that just gets me so upset because I think, how are you falling for this?
For sure. And I think that, and there's like a lot of bots out there that are fake, that are just there to push the misinformation. So we have to keep that in mind too. But what I have found is with people on my Twitter feed, especially, there's a lot of people that, will push back on things that we do on the show or push back on a fact that we put out. And so there are a lot of people I engage with that I know they don't agree with me on certain things, but we have actually created a dialogue. And it allows us to go back and forth. But yes, you got to protect your mental health at the same time. You got to protect, this is my job. This is what I do. So it's part of what I do. But, I grew up in Western Canada. Even between the West and East, there are very big differences in how people view things. And in some ways, I feel like that's equipped me because I sit in these communities of different thought all the time. I come from a religious background that, it has different ties as well, right? So if the more comfortable we can be in different spaces with people, the more we can build a relationship, the more we have the opportunity then to bring in facts, because relationship is actually more important than facts. The facts come with the relationship.
You mentioned you've got a show coming up on romance scams. What else can we expect? Are there any topics you're particularly excited or maybe even a little bit nervous to tackle this year?
Oh man, we're like right in production right now. But romance scams is huge. And people, honestly, so many people get duped by that. So I think it's one we have to talk about. I'm really interested by, you may have heard about the 15-minute cities.
Yes.
The 15-minute cities and the backlash that we've seen in some smaller Canadian communities too. Essentially, something that was started by a researcher years ago that was just kind of, trying to make the cities more transit friendly, people walking, just let's be better for the environment type of thing, has really turned into people's fears that people are going to be locked inside these 15-minute corridors in there and they can't really get out. And a lot of that stems, from COVID and people feeling like their rights were trampled on. Whether that's justified or not is a different reason, but those fears are real. And so I find it very fascinating. Like, I really want to dig into that because I think it needs more time than just a 4-minute interview. I think it needs a show. So I would really like to get into that. I've been reading recently about predatory journals. So this is, for example, in academia. So you have, usually peer-reviewed sources of material that you would look at and say, oh, look, here's evidence for X. But now there's all these predatory journals, which are, kind of working off of the fact that academics have to publish. They have to publish and there's pressure to publish. And so do we get their publications into these predatory journals that aren't actually peer reviewed, but they're out there, again, part of the misinformation world. And so people can find facts to back up anything that they want. It doesn't actually mean that it's gone through the rigorous process that an academic journal would have. So I find that super interesting because that's a world that I'm not in. I'd like to look into. Yeah, honestly, our team, there's never ending ideas, sadly, for this show. There's a lot of content, and with the administration down south, there's going to be even more.
Mm-hmm.
But that's why I think it's also important. And I think the timing of it is right. And I hope people, hopefully we can help a few people and they can, send us their ideas too, and we can tackle more subjects.
I think the timing is perfect for this. So if people want to watch Big If True, obviously they can catch it on TVO. But as you mentioned, not everybody watches regular TV. So where else can they catch, the show and keep up with you?
Yes. So TVO, if you're a TV watcher, you can catch us Sunday nights at 8 p.m. on TVO. And if you're not, our website has it up in full on Sunday night, the whole episode. And our YouTube channel is really the place to be. So Big If True TVO at Big If True TVO. And we'll upload segments throughout the week. So our best of the show is going to come out throughout the week. So you're going to get constant content that is coming out. So that's the best place. And on our socials, of course, Instagram, Big If True TVO, on my TikTok, Molly Thomas TV. Just, follow along, see what we're putting out there, question us, push back on us. We can take it. It's part of what we want to do. And let's start that conversation.
Well, I'll be keeping up for sure. I'm already obsessed. I plowed through all of the episodes last night, and I love that you keep it short and but packed with information. So, Molly, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a real pleasure.
It's really great to connect with you, Candace, and good on all that you're doing.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to share it with someone who'd love it too. And don't forget to hit subscribe to What She Said with me, Candace Sampson, on your favorite podcast app. It's the easiest way to stay connected. Want more? Sign up for my newsletter at whatshesaidtalk.com to get all the latest updates, and let's keep the conversation going on social. You can find What She Said on Facebook and Instagram, and you'll find me on Threads, TikTok, and Blue Sky at Candace Said. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week.
Hi, this is Terry Evans. I've been waking Edmontonians up for over 40 years. When people ask me, when are you starting a podcast? The answer was usually, never. I always thought doing the radio show was enough. Yet here we are, and I have reluctantly jumped in with both feet. With a new show featuring remarkable people with fantastic stories that deserve to be heard. The stories told in the first person by the storytellers themselves, comics, musicians, sports personalities, entrepreneurs, wackos, weirdos, and nut bars. I've met them all, and in a large part, they've been a huge part of my world and the world of those who listen to my morning show every day. You might say that they have made my world go round. Good friends and great conversations. Reluctantly with Terry Evans on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and at reluctantlypodcast.com.
It is your favorite girl. That's right. It's the Allie Mars, the one and the only. Everyone else just ain't me. I am the host of Welcome to Mars, a lifestyle podcast where nothing is off the table. I have come a long way from sex and dating and have transformed the new vibe to all things lifestyle. We still talk sex, but I'm more interested in the journey, where people have come from, how they made it, and where they're going. Subscribe or follow to a brand new look and a brand new era. Welcome to Mars.
Subscribe or follow on Apple, Spotify, Google, or at thealliemars.com.
Because even with the new look, I'm still that same bitch you love to hate.
Another Sound Off Media Company podcast.